And hello and welcome to the Play to Your Best Summit with incredible speakers that are joining us on all levels. We have mindset, nutrition, training, recovery, and today we have the incredible Nikki, Naab Levy, who is an expert in strength and helping us come, just exactly as we are with all of our complexities and issues with time, etc. And we're going to talk about how do we get through some of these barriers today. But what I wanted to do is just first introduce. So hello, Nikki, welcome, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here.
There you are. So you are, just to give the audience a little bit of knowledge about who you are specifically a strength and a nutrition coach with well over a decade of experience where you're really helping people move beyond the injury. And you've developed an approach to eating that makes people feel like they've got this. Essentially, like you can do this. Takes out the complexity and allows people to really come to where they can feel confident and secure and keep going. Really, it's not something a flash in the pan here. You hold a degree or a Bachelor of Science in exercise science. You have an incredible multitude of talents as well, because you do journalism, and this has brought you in bringing these talents together to be featured in many things like Self Magazine, Women's Health, and one of my favorite, and I always have to give plugs for Girls Gone Strong, because I just adore what they do and what they're doing for female athletes and females in general from like every single angle. So am I missing anything that you wanted to share about yourself?
No. I've been around the block. I've done this for a while. And the more I do it, the longer I do it, the more I realize that basics are really important. And while basics sounds easy, it's not easy. It's just the stuff that actually keeps us going. So if we understand what those basics are for our unique needs, then we don't get so pulled apart trying to follow fads and rules, and all of this other information that gets thrown at us feels a lot less overwhelming, because you're like, that's cool, but I know it works for me, and you're able to just kind of put your head down and do your thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's so tell me a little bit more about yourself, or tell us all a little bit more about who you are and why it is that you came to this, passion of really wanting to support people to like make it so accessible for themselves. Like, how did you get there?
I think a lot of it is both having my own challenges, because I'm not one of those genetically gifted people where everything lined up. Nothing lined up. It's very likely that I have a connective tissue disorder. I'm prone to injury. I'm prone to pain. And strength did not feel intuitive to me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like it. I wasn't good at it. And when I finally started doing it, I was like, oh, this is actually the thing I need that makes my life so much better. And it's kind of similar with nutrition. And so I'm like, wow, these things are really valuable if we can make them make sense for our bodies. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, the way that a lot of programs and things are set up is I think they're overly complex and intimidating, and they don't take into account people who have stuff going on, because I think in some ways, like sometimes bodies hurt. Pain and injury, I don't want to say it's the norm, but it's going to happen. And if you don't have an understanding of how to navigate that stuff, then it's really hard to start and it's really hard to keep going. And so I just sort of saw a big gap in that for myself and for others, or anyone who had anything going on, where we're not just 20-year-olds anymore. So I think that's why it's so important to me, is because I'm like, this stuff can really change your life, but it's really hard to stick with it. And you're not going to be incentivized to stick with it if your body feels like crap and you spend all your time being terrified that you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a real, I think you're bang on in thinking about how we approach, like we come into a gym and we just see all of the stuff. And like, I remember, my first experiences of walking into a gym, and I would just like, walk like straight to, a barbell that I was like, okay, I've got the dumbbells, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to lift these. I'm just going to go and do some up and downs. Like, like you just, it's hard, and it's hard to think about what to do. And then, am I doing the right thing? And do I have the right form? When you're just kind of standing there. And so I think reaching out and finding people like you is exactly where it can feel so much more comfortable just to start. And then I think that where I'd like to go with this is talking a little bit more. And can you get specific in your examples of like the why? Like it's almost like finding your why. So it's like connecting the strength that you have to do what you really love to do. And can you give examples of the people that you work with, or in yourself in your own life, of like, what was that aha moment like for somebody? Because what we want to leave with, and what we want to leave the listeners with, is this idea of like, oh, okay, I can connect that. I can put energy into that because I know where I'm going from my now.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I think it starts with trying to figure out, how would strength tie into your interests? And I think a lot of the time, the way we often talk about fitness is in this way where it's like, and it's true, if you don't keep moving and do strength training, there are some sort of like negative ramifications that we have when we age. But I don't like looking at it from the side of, all these terrible things will happen to you and the sky will fall if you don't exercise. I don't think that's very motivating. I think that's kind of depressing, and that makes us feel bad. I prefer to look at it as what would you be excited to do with your body? What is of interest to you? What do you want to be able to do? And this just depends on the client. I have some clients who've pursued strength with me because they loved running, and they kept having like different repetitive stress injuries with their foot and their lower leg and their hip and their knee. And once they started strength training, they were able to withstand the forces of running, and running became easier and less painful. And they were able to do it longer and better because they weren't constantly stuck in this revolving door of injuries. I have another client who could care less about that stuff, but she loves to garden. And a lot of what she was doing was picking up these giant pavers and carrying them back and forth across her yard, setting up and building this elaborate garden. And so for her, strength gave her the ability to, even though she's almost 70 years old, carry giant rocks back and forth across her yard without feeling any pain or being worried or needing to ask her husband to help her. So she felt, independent and like she was able to do things herself. And so to me, a lot of the really empowering thing about strength is you can take it and you can apply it to whatever your personal interest is, to make yourself better at that thing and more robust at that thing, and able to do that thing without, again, constantly feeling like, oh, I wish I could do it, but my shoulder, my hip, my this, my that. It just makes everything feel so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. So one of the things that you were talking about earlier is like fitting it into our life, and how it just feels so intimidating. And sometimes we make it so complex, of like all the progressions and the variations and the whatever. So, and we're talking about strength here, but then we're going to also talk about the nutrition, because it actually is not that much different. No. So can you share with us, what do people need to know about this, like how to just simplify some of these big ideas, or and how to bring it into their chaotic and busy lives that they already have, and they're not going to give up?
Yes, I think it first starts with being honest with yourself, which is not what is optimal. What will you actually start to do consistently? And I think it's worth keeping in mind that if you strength train at least 2 times a week, then you have the ability to create enough volume to build muscle, or at the least, maintain muscle and build strength. If you do it at least 1 time a week, that creates a certain level of maintenance. So ideally, you would do it 2 times a week, interspersed with the rest of your activities. If that was your primary activity and you wanted to do it 3 to 4 times a week, great. But if 3 to 4 times a week is not going to happen, don't even worry about that right now. If 2 times a week is not going to happen, start with 1. And then from there, a lot of the people I work with, like, when you get to a certain point, it's really helpful to be able to go into a gym because you have so many more options for your weights and your kettlebells and your cables or whatever it is that you're using. But if you're like, I'm not going into a gym, fine, buy a couple kettlebells or buy a couple sets of dumbbells and start with a really basic program that involves the major muscle groups. So that would be like a squat, a hinge, which is a deadlift, pushing and pulling in different directions with your arms, usually horizontal and vertical, so overhead, and things. If it's horizontal, it's going to be things like push-ups or rows, that sort of thing, and then just sort of build from there with the equipment that you have. So it really can be as simple as pick a couple exercises, do them for a couple rounds for, let's say, 20 to 40 minutes, 1 to 2 times a week. See how you do with that, refine your technique, and then take it from there. And I just find sometimes people go, well, do I do kettlebells or do I do dumbbells? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. And right, like a lot of it is they're like, which one do I try? And it's like, I don't know, pick one that sounds good to you, try it. And then if you like it, stick with it and expand your skill set. And if you're like, this one's not for me, great. Jump from dumbbells over to kettlebells and try that. There's a lot of ways to get strong.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying is like, it takes a whole lot of curiosity, like start somewhere. Like the point is, let's start. And if you don't like it, there's going to be another way. And keep the commitment isn't necessarily to don't feel like this is the way. And if you don't like it, then, there goes strength. Not going to do it. It's like, no, there goes that exercise. Let's try a different one, like a different method. Like maybe you love bands, maybe you like TRX, maybe you like holding weights, or like there's so many different methodologies for which we can come into the conversation of strength. And it's about starting. And I think that where you're saying is that if you can get excited about just the beginning, you can add on the skill set that will bring into complexity, that'll keep you stretching and going. But let's just find that starting point that you find joy in. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. And, if you're stuck, ask for help. Like that's the other thing is there are a lot of ways to do one exercise. There's a lot of ways to do a floor press or a push-up. There is a lot of ways to lunge. If your knee hurts when you lunge, you can start with something that's just an isometric version of it where you're not even moving up and down. And I think people don't realize how scalable strength is, because again, we sort of, and there's nothing wrong with this, but we sort of like try to find our exercises on Instagram or YouTube. And sometimes just going to someone and being like, hey, where do I start? What would be the exercises that would work for me to start with? Sometimes that's what it takes to kind of get your foot in the door, as opposed to, I think sometimes we just get a little too caught up in sort of like program hopping or trying random things. And really where we get stronger is by practicing the same types of movements again and again, progressively over time with gradually incrementally heavier weights. And so it's actually a lot more straightforward than we let it be for ourselves sometimes.
It's so interesting because I think that a lot of coaches get caught into that is like, oh, we need variety. And it's like, I just like, it's like going into the grocery store and then you see like 20 boxes of cereals and you just look at it and it's just like, I don't care. Like, like choose one. It's like variety does not always help us, and simplicity is actually makes our life so much easier.
Yeah. And the thing I love about strength is like, okay, great. I did a squat. The squat got easy. How do I make the squat harder? I get a heavier weight. It can be that simple.
I love it. I love it that you're just like straight shooting. Like this is exactly it. Like let's and yet it still can feel daunting.
Yeah.
And for people, and it's still, and if so, if you're feeling that way, as this is like, I don't know, like I this whole thing, then you're also saying, ask for help and find your place and find your group, find your personal trainer, whatever it is that is going to motivate you to start showing up for yourself in this way, so you can get to doing the things that you love. So let's just turn this on its head just a little and bring in the nutritional component. And what would you say, echoing this idea of simplicity and of, strength training, but within the nutrition realm. What are you seeing there with a lot of the clients that you work with? And what would you like people to know in that space?
I think one of the things is that we tend to, again, get really granular when we don't have like simple things in place first, right? Or we get really caught up on like, what is the best food to eat and what are the worst foods to eat? And we start sort of like sticking these things into lists, which is exhausting and not terribly helpful. Whereas I find a much easier way to do it, especially if you're not very consistent, right? You sometimes eat breakfast, you never eat lunch, you're super hungry at night, you have a headache, and then like, you eat the house at like 10 p.m. and you're like, what just happened? And a lot of that type of stuff that happens is we go, well, it's emotional, and it might be emotional, but a lot of the time it's simply that like, we're not eating in regular intervals. We're not eating enough protein, which is the most satiating macronutrient. And we're not just sort of getting a relatively balanced plate, which again, it doesn't need to require any type of like obsessive tracking or anything. Especially in the beginning, it can be as simple as like, all right, I look at my plate. Do I have something that is protein? Do I have something that is a starchy carb? Do I have something that is a fibrous carb, which basically means fruit or vegetable? And do I have some sort of fat? And if you just have those variety of things on your plate, you're going to have relatively balanced blood sugar. You are going to usually stay full longer, and you're going to get a mix of nutrients. And if you can sort of do that 3 to 5 times a day, then you're also sort of ensuring that you have energy for everything that you're doing during the day. Whereas I think a lot of the time, people skip meals until like noon, and then they're like, oh, why does my workout feel terrible? And it's like, well, your workout feels terrible because you have literally no fuel and you're hungry, and bodies don't perform very well when we do that to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we can, I think you're totally just like so bang on. It's starting to the foundation of, understanding hunger too, like how I illustrate this is, starting at the base of a triangle is you're, becoming in tune with your eating, and then moving up, like, do you have energy, is it available, or just to all those points, and like getting the big foundational pieces are, that's it. Don't worry about all the vitamins and the minerals and the amino acids and the because we can go there, but is it going to help you? Well, not if you don't have enough, if you're not eating.
Yeah, correct. And also like, who has the time to like calculate their amino acids? Like, that's exhausting. You're way better off planning like your general meals for the week than being like, okay, how much leucine did I get today? Like, there's no way. It's just an exercise in tedium and madness, and it's not helpful.
Yeah. And unless you are looking for that specificity in your life and really targeting goals, but that's not the population that we're talking about right here and right now. And, of trying to break down barriers and trying to keep it simple so that we can keep going, and trying to manage it within really busy lives in which we are juggling all the balls. And, because we'll have people that really want to get into the minutia of understanding, you need 3 grams of leucine, blah, 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 blah. And that could be important to them because they've got all those fundamental things. But again, just like you were saying in the strength, let's make sure that we just got the squat with kettlebell, squat with heavier kettlebell, squat with even heavier kettlebell.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Exactly.
So it's like protein at breakfast and dinner, protein with breakfast and lunch, maybe a little bit at least, and then dinner. Oh my goodness, we've got it. Like, we're really moving forward. And I just love it. I think it's perfect. And is there other things that you feel like you really want to get across in sharing to the people here?
I think that all of these things are skills. And so if you feel like you're not naturally good at strength training, I don't feel like I'm naturally good at strength training. I've got, I'm built like a spider, short torso, long levers. That makes pushing weight much harder than someone who's got short arms and legs, right? If you feel like you're quote unquote bad at nutrition, you can't figure out how to eat, you can't figure out how to structure those things. All of these things are skills, and skills can be learned. And so it's okay to start and feel like you're not very good at it. The way that you get better at it is by practice. So it's not like you tried it once, everything lined up, off you go. It really is the process of trying it, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, evaluating it, trying to figure out why that didn't go quite right, and then trying it again, and then just refining that over time. And through that process of trying and reflecting and testing and learning, that's when we start to figure out what really works for us, our best version of a squat, the meals that work, that make us feel our best, that give us the most energy, the meal timing that makes us feel our best and gives us the most energy, the things that are going to trip us up that we know that we need to plan for in advance. And so really, it's not about being good or perfect. It's really about being willing to like just keep trying things and then refining as you go and getting better that way.
I think it's so excellent. One of the things that we do is we also within this series is you give a free gift, and you have a free gift, and it's called Strength and Nutrition Simplified. How brilliant is that? It's a free guide to mastering the basics of strength training and nutrition. Do you want to just share a little bit more about that with us?
Yes. Absolutely. So for anyone who's like, well, what are nutrition basics? What are some core habits or ideas that I can start with? It's just going to give you a list of things to implement. And what you might find is some of the things you're already doing, and you can be like, yay. And then if there's something that's missing, you can try, maybe the way I would suggest doing it is implementing one habit at a time, maybe over the course of a couple weeks, noticing how you feel, and then adding a new one. And then same thing there with the strength side. It's just a couple really simple strength programs that don't take a lot of equipment. So if you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what the main exercises are, it's just a simple way to just start doing things on your own a couple times a week. So you feel like you can get started with something, with the most basic versions. And again, what I'll say is basic tends to be very effective if you can do it consistently. So it's more about finding something that you can actually do than it is about trying to find the best, most optimal plan ever. You can always optimize later, but the thing that's most important is to actually just start and start to see what's actually working and what's not.
Yeah. Amen to that. Sounds fantastic. So one thing I wanted to share with everybody, and I do have 3 rapid fire questions that I'm going to ask you. But before we get there, I just want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you. So to find and to connect with you, you can definitely go to Nikki's website, naablevy.com. That's NAAB Levy.com. And yeah, she has tons of different resources, and her podcast as well. Can you just tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you do within that?
Sure. So the podcast is called Results Not Typical. You're going to be on it shortly, so they should go check out that episode. And it really, I'd love to say that it has all these targeted things, but it really is just sort of conversations that I want to be having that I think need to be had around different things that are both sort of like entertaining and also educational and thoughtful. So like we haven't recorded it yet, but one of the ones that we have coming up is we're actually a friend of mine who's a PhD and another friend of mine who has an MS in science. We're going to look through sort of some of the data around like, what does it take for women to build bone density? And is Pilates and yoga enough, or do we need to be strength training? And what are these variables? And so a lot of it too, that I try to use it for is sort of helping people wade through the information, because especially on social media these days, anyone can say anything and it may or may not actually make sense in reality. And so the podcast is sort of a place to dive a little bit deeper on like, okay, what actually is going to work? What are some practical applications, and what claims are being made that like, you might not want to go down that rabbit hole or worry about that one.
Yeah. And I guess what I love about you and why I reached out to you is because you really do dial into the science, and you really do care about what is known now. And it may change as nutritional science has evolved greatly,
Yes.
as we know. But that you stay really grounded in that, which I really appreciate. All right. Are you ready for my rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
All right. What in your work and your learning are you really excited about right at this time?
Anytime that I work with a client, whether it's nutrition or strength, and they come to me and they're like, yep, this isn't for me, I just can't figure it out. And then they reach out and they're like, this thing that I've been struggling with for so long finally clicked. And like, now I'm just like, oh, why didn't I do this before? Right. I love watching people sort of make those ahas and realize that they're very, very capable of doing these things. They just sort of needed a little bit of structure or support to get there, or the right version of something. So to me, it's just always so exciting watching things click for people.
Yeah, I think you said it, you nailed it, is structure, is a bit of structure. And um, James Clear says we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And that's what you're speaking to. And it's definitely what my program is about. What is one thing you are grateful for?
I would just say my community. I'm an internet business. I work from home. It can feel very lonely to sit in your house all by yourself. And it's really nice to have other colleagues and people to share ideas with. And I always feel like anything that we create or we come up with is so much better when it's collaboration and there's more than one brain involved. And it's a lot more enjoyable. Like, I think that's also why I love the podcast, is that it also is a chance to collaborate and connect with other people. So I would say community.
Yeah, I love that. Like, this is why I love doing these series, because it is absolutely like, it's meeting you, it's meeting all these people from just incredible walks and all over the world. And we've just made it so much more accessible and together. What is one, and the final question is, what is one principle that you live by?
Honesty. For better or worse, I cannot misrepresent things if I know them to be true. Like, I'd rather be honest and let things be harder than lie to people. I think that's why I care about things being evidence-based, is that I think people deserve access to good information. And again, like, I think that there's value in education that takes a complicated idea and it breaks it down into simple terms. But at the end of the day, I think that when we empower people with actual education information, everyone does better. And so to me, honesty and transparency are just really important.
I think it's super interesting you said that, because just earlier in the interview, you also said, we have to start from a place of like looking at ourselves and being like, honestly, what am I going to be able to do? And that goes two ways, is what I'm saying here is that you brought it into, let's find out exactly where you can be at and be honest with that space and what you will and will not take on. And if strength is something that has been difficult, let's look at that. Let's like nail right into there and say, okay, so where's our opening, and to be really clear in that. And then you've also turned it just in this question around and said, I'm outwardly going to be honest with you and be clear with you about what's possible in the science, or, et cetera, et cetera. It's really cool. I love that, how that kind of is a thread through the way that you work. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners?
No, just if anyone has any questions for me, wants to reach out, you are welcome to shoot me a DM on Instagram, an email, whatever. I answer all the things. I'm in charge of all the things on my communications online. So all things it'll eventually end up in front of me either way.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect. I am in charge of all the things. It's totally entrepreneurship. We do all the things. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and being here with all of us and sharing your gold. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.